Welcome back, everyone! For our next art activity, I'll be showing you how to make some animal sculptures out of salt dough. Salt dough is a quick and easy recipe using materials you probably already have at home. Let's get started. You will need 2 cups of flour, 1 cup of salt, approximately 1 cup of water, and a bowl and a spoon for mixing. Once your salt dough is complete, you'll have to wrap it in some cling wrap and store it in an airtight container. It lasts for about 5 days. I will begin by adding my 2 cups of flour and 1 cup of salt into my large mixing bowl. Then I will stir it together thoroughly. Next, I need to add my 1 cup of water. However, I am not going to add my water all at once. I will add it bit by bit, stirring in small increments. If I were to add too much water at one time, my dough could end up too wet. As I continue stirring, my flour and salt mixture will begin to clump together. It's exactly as if I were making cookies or bread, except I guarantee you salt dough will not taste very good. With no additional ingredients, it would just taste like a big clump of salt. Blech. Once your ingredients start combining, you can knead your dough in the bowl. This is exactly as if we were making bread. The mixture has become too stiff for my spoon. Instead, I use my hand to make sure I've gotten all of the flour from the sides of the bowls thoroughly mixed through. Once my mixture is a nice consistency, not too wet and not too dry, I can take it out and pat it into a round ball. To keep my salt dough from drying out, I need to wrap it in some cling wrap. If you do not have cling wrap at home, a plastic bag also works. Just make sure that all air has been smooshed out of the bag. You could also use aluminum foil to wrap your salt dough. However, cling wrap works the best as it tightly squeezes out all of the air surrounding my salt dough. For added protection, you could also put your salt dough into an airtight container after wrapping it in cling wrap. However, I'm going to start sculpting right away. Let's get started. Now that my dough is ready to go, I've gotten out a small baking sheet that I've then covered with parchment paper. The parchment paper helps to keep my salt dough from sticking. I've also poured myself a cup of water so that I can wet my salt dough if it gets too dry. I need to be very careful with the water, however, because if I add too much, my salt dough will start to get very sticky. I will start in a very similar manner to how we begin most of our clay projects. I will roll my salt dough into a smooth ball. I will then flatten the ball of dough into a circle. Just like with clay, we want to make sure that the thickness is about that of a cookie. If any of the edges start to crack, I can wet my fingers with water and gently smooth them out. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing but with much smaller pieces of clay to make the muzzle for my dog. Since this is dough and not clay, it won't go into a kiln, just an oven, so I don't need to worry about scoring and slipping. As long as I securely press down on all the pieces of my sculpture, they should stay just fine as my sculpture bakes. To create my dog's nose, I simply roll a very small ball of clay and then use my fingers to press it into a triangle. The nose will go on as an upside-down triangle, just like a dog in real life. I will then begin creating all of the unique details to my dog. I will begin with a patch on his eye in sort of a blobby shape. I will roll and gently press down on 2 more small balls of clay. This will form the outer white portion of my dog's eye. In a minute, I'll show you how to add the darker inside portion of your dog's eye. I can explore with a variety of shapes and sizes for my dog's ears. If you're using a real-life animal as inspiration, think about if the ears are pointy or floppy, large or small. I think I'm going to make one ear flap down and the other up in the air, almost as if my dog is listening inquisitively. It's important that I press my shape securely and then blend my edges, perhaps even using a little bit of water. This will help all of my pieces stick together. And I don't need fancy art tools to add my finishing touches. I can just use a pencil. I used the end of my pencil, the eraser part, for the inside portion of my dog's eyes, and the pointy part for the texture on his muzzle. The last piece I will add is his tongue. I think this just helps give him a bit more unique character. I can take the pointy portion of my pencil and add a little bit of texture. We know that texture is one of the 7 elements of art, along with line, shape, form, space, value, and color. By the time we're done with our animal sculptures, we will have used all of the elements of art. Maybe you'd like to create a cat. It's a very similar process to building a dog. I'm just going to make some minor changes to my shapes and forms. For example, instead of making floppy ears, I'm going to make my ears pointy. I'm forming a triangle, very much how I formed my dog's nose earlier in the video. Once again, I want to make sure the thickness of my dough is approximately that of a cookie. If it's too thick, it will take forever to bake, and if it's too thin, it could crack. Once again, I'm taking care to gently blend the seams where I added each form. I am going to make the muzzle for my cat in a slightly different way. Nonetheless, I will start with a small upside down triangle for the nose, just like I did for my dog. Once the nose is on, I am going to roll some very, very small coils. This will form the mouth for my cat, which is a little bit more dainty than how I added my dog's mouth. I like to divide making the mouth into 2 parts because I think it makes things a little bit easier. It also helps me make both sides of the face the same. We know that something that is the same on both sides is called symmetrical. All living things, including people, cats, dogs, and even as we saw in our last video, Pikachus, have faces that are symmetrical. I think I'm going to make the eyes a little bit different for my cat. I'm going to have them overlap each other ever so slightly. Nonetheless, I will use the eraser portion of my pencil to add the inside of my cat's eyes. Notice how my placement of the eyes makes it look like my cat is looking up and in one direction. Finally, I will roll some even tinier coils to add the whiskers. This might take you a few tries. It did for me. Just be patient and keep going. For my very last thing, I'm going to add a tiny triangle inside my cat's ears. This just gives a little bit more interest and dimension to my sculpture. Now I will add some finishing touches to my sculpture. You can use a pencil, a paintbrush, or your finger, and some water. I will first take the pencil and smooth the remaining edges. making sure that the sides are neatly blended. Then I can go back with a paintbrush or my finger dipped in water and smooth the remaining portions of my sculpture. You'll notice that this is exactly the same as what we would do in class with clay. Once again, we need to remember to be very careful not to add too much water, or our sculpture will get too sticky. You might recognize these sculptures because they're very similar to the cat and dog bobbleheads that my 5th and 6th graders were working on before we moved to online learning. You could even try making a bobblehead with your salt dough. I will include a link in the description to the art teacher's channel who was helping us make those. She has tons of amazing art videos you could check out as well, especially while we're cooped up during online learning. In the meantime, I'll also be posting new videos every few days. Once your sculpture is complete, ask a parent or guardian to help you bake it in the oven. I started with my oven at 200 degrees. I later bumped it up to 250. My salt dough sculptures baked for about 2.5 hours. Depending on the size and thickness of your sculpture, it might take you a longer or shorter time to bake. Just keep an eye on it. In our next video, we will be painting our sculptures. But in the meantime, I have some completed Pikachus from our last video to show you. I got some amazing submissions from some awesome artists. Not only did you all capture Picasso's personality, but I can see your own unique personalities shining through your art. I wish I could hang them all on my refrigerator, but I guess the internet will have to suffice. Even my mom joined in on drawing Pikachu while she's been cooped up at home. Creating with our families can be a great way to have fun with one another, especially while we're stuck inside. If you create a salt dough animal sculpture, I'll be sure to include it in our next video. Talk to y'all soon. Artie on!